Just got done with a text conversation with a client of mine that I'm working with in their job search. Unfortunately, because of the environment that we're in right now, there are a lot of people that are out of work unexpectedly due to the COVID crisis. People that have been furloughed and then eventually laid off, or people that were just straight up laid off. And there's a lot of uncertainty and frustration about the process, because especially when you're applying for a role that you know you're an excellent fit for, but there's also thousands of other people that they are being bombarded with their resumes and requests for interviews, etc. It can be frustrating and can be very, very exhausting in a lot of ways. But I have one particular client that I've been working with for a while, and they've come really, really close, only to get almost to the finish line, being the last one or two or three people to be considered for the role, and eventually lose it. And they came back to me and they said, something is not working. I'm getting all the way to this point and it looks good. I'm getting good positive feedback from, the recruiter or the HR manager. Looks like an offer is imminent, only to receive the Dear John/Jane email that says we've gone a different direction or we've chosen another candidate. And this person was super frustrated. And I get it. I totally get all the frustration, especially in a situation where in a role that, this person is applying for, they are generally having to check a number of boxes. So that means that the interview process that they're going through is not straightforward one or two interviews, but it's literally multiple phone conversations, maybe multiple video interviews, different round table. There's a lot of hoops that this particular individual is going through. They get to the point where because of their experience and their background, it's really hard to illustrate the value that they bring to an organization simply on paper. And despite that, they're still getting to this close to finish line situation. And so what I came back to, and I thought might be advice that could benefit some of you that are in your job search, is the rules of the game have shifted so dramatically that the people that are thinking outside of the box to really raise their flag a bit higher than anyone else, to say they want that job, they're the ones getting the job, which means they're thinking out of the box in terms of not only who they're connecting with relative to the position, but the time, energy, and effort that they are putting in to make connections within that corporation for other individuals who might on the sidelines have some ability to influence who and why they choose the candidate that they do. And so in this instance, this particular individual said, they came back, got all the way up to the top level executive. And the interview they thought had gone really well and did the normal thank you so much, appreciation kind of deal. Send an email, which we'll get to here in just a second. But got feedback from the recruiter that this particular individual thought that the role was too beneath them and that they should move on and look at another candidate. Now, up to that point, that person had jumped through multiple hoops to get it. And yes, based on the past job experience, the role responsibility for this particular position, on paper, it looks like something that ultimately would be maybe a step backwards for this particular individual. But the feedback that they got in this instance was that this person would take the job, get bored, and would eventually leave. Lots of ways to approach this, right, in terms of how poorly that thinking is. Number one, before you make assumptions about whether that person would ultimately do that, have a better understanding and a conversation with that particular candidate about what your concerns are. That should have come up during the interview. Probably was a concern before they ever set up the interview. So they should have come prepared to have that conversation. If we give you this job, how do we know, or what assurances can you give us that you'll be here long term? Now, we're not talking indentured servitude, right? People can leave, right? So that's, as a business owner, I can appreciate and understand wanting to make the right hire because you put a ton of time and energy and effort into somebody that's coming on board with your team. You don't want to see them jump ship in 6 months. And although there's no guarantee in life or in work that won't happen, you can certainly set the expectations that, look, if we were to do this, this is where my biggest concerns are, and you help me understand how you can get around those so that we can move forward. And we have definite interest. We're very intrigued by what you might bring to the table. And quite honestly, I'm concerned that you might grow bored with this role. So maybe help me understand how that might play out. Now, the interesting thing about that from a company perspective, right? If you feel like this person could do this job in their sleep, I actually had this conversation with another friend of mine that's running into this exact same thing, not a coaching client, just somebody I'm helping. And if you feel like you know that already they think you can do that job in your sleep, then you should, as the candidate, bring that up and say, look, not only can I handle this, but the value of bringing someone with my age and experience onto this role is not only can I handle what you're going to hand me, but I have enough global understanding and experience that I'm probably going to be able to be a contributor in several other areas that once we get this handled, I'm going to have the time and capacity in order to do. And I want you to know that is something I'm coming in completely aware of and completely open to doing, because that brings more value to the organization. Just saying, look, I can handle this job and I will do it absolutely like a rock star. But then once I have that handled, I'm not going to grow bored because I'm going to look for other ways to contribute and add value to the organization. So companies are kind of missing the mark there. Candidates are kind of missing the mark there. So how do you bridge it? Well, because we know these conversations are not happening in the interview process, then you have to think outside the box, right? You need to start having those conversations and proactively as the candidate bringing those things up. You need to ask the question when you're being interviewed, what concerns would you have based on what you've heard today in our interview or what you see on my resume? What concerns might you have going forward with me? That's a huge question because it actually opens up and gives the invitation to the interviewer, potentially the manager or executive that you're going to be working for, to lay those things on the table so that you can address them and have that discussion right then and there. Coming back through the recruiter or HR later doesn't do you a lot of good. But what I suggested to this particular client of mine, I said, you have nothing to lose to swing for the fences. So reach out to this person directly. Reach out to them, have a call, and ask them, I understand that there are some concerns. I'd like to address those. And let me tell you where my thinking is. And I realize, and in this instance, this person is been to the highest peaks of the Executive Valley and has done everything in every role leading up to that. But he's not looking for that role any longer. He's looking for something that he can be a solid contributor for the next however long, but he's not going to join this company and then immediately have his resume out there on the street looking for bigger and better opportunities. But they don't know that unless you communicate that, right? And so I said, you have absolutely nothing to lose by reaching out. You have nothing to lose by explaining your circumstances and why this would be a safe and very effective hire for them. And then putting it out there. Whatever organization you may work for may have a 90-day probationary period. Say, hey, I'm willing to extend that an additional 90 days for you guys to have a comfort level that I am here for the duration. Let me get my day-to-day responsibilities under control. You know I can do this. You know that I have the experience and the understanding of the role. And then once I have that extra capacity, let me start to ask some questions about other areas of the business that I can contribute in. Or perhaps once you have a comfort level with me as a solid member of the team, you'll begin to see other opportunities to utilize my skill sets. This is a scary process, especially if you're a job candidate, because you don't want to upset the apple cart. There is a decorum to the process in most cases, which I say you've got to throw those rules out. If you want your job, that HR director, that recruiter, they're not your advocate. They aren't. They're the ones that are there to just fill a hole. However they can do it. And if it's with you, great. But if it's not, doesn't matter. They're going to find somebody else. You have to be your own champion. You have to be your own advocate. And you have to think outside the box to communicate what you bring to the table. And that's true whether it's this top level position where maybe your prior experience is working against you, because they assume you're going to be too expensive or that you perhaps may not stick around, all the way down to whatever role you want. You have to be able to think outside the box, and you have to be willing to figure out what it is about what might give them pause and put that on the table for discussion early and often. And for those candidates that are out there that have been through that process and then feel like they hit the brick wall, they're not getting a call back, position is still posted, but they've told you they're moving on, there is zero to lose by going back to the person that you interviewed with and say, look, can I have just a really frank conversation? If nothing else, this could really benefit me greatly. And I would just ask you for the consideration of 10 minutes to have a call so I can understand a few things. And then tell them, look, this is what I think is potentially the problem. Or if you've been given the feedback that maybe you're too experienced or going to be too expensive or whatever the issue is, it's an opportunity to have that dialogue and say, look, I'm not trying here to oversell myself. I'm also not trying to get you to go back on a conversation or a decision, I should say, that you've already potentially made to move on. But what I would like to know is what could I have done differently to make me a better, more attractive candidate for you? What you'll find is when you put it on the table like that, most people, human nature, when you ask a straightforward question, you generally will almost always get a straightforward answer, especially if they have nothing to risk. The value in asking that question is, in most cases, even if they're not going to come back and even reconsider you, you may learn some things about your interview, your resume, answers that you gave, concerns that were on the table that maybe you didn't pick up on that will help you in your next interview. So I don't know if any of this helps. I know we kind of went around this whole process a little bit, but if I could make an appeal to any of the job search candidates out there, the rules of the game have changed. You need to set the new rules. You have to be your own advocate. You have to be your own champion. You have to go through some extra work and preparation to make sure that you are an attractive candidate. And for any company looking to hire, please look beyond the resume. Look beyond what you see just there in job experience or work history and recognize that there is a ton of fantastic talent out there that desperately wants to come to work for your organization and they just want the chance. I understand your concerns. I'm a business owner myself. I own software companies. It's a huge risk. So put the risk on the table. Let them know that you have concerns in job history. Let them know you're concerned about their long-term commitment to the company. If you feel like there's a role that this person obviously could fit but would probably grow bored or would not find it ultimately challenging. So you're looking at them like this is a step back or this is maybe not a great fit for them. Don't make that assumption either. Ask them, why did you go for this role? Why is this role of interest to you? And dig into that and then raise your concern about, look, I can see you can do this in your sleep. So how can you help me get comfortable with you taking a role that may be 2 steps back or a step back from what you just previously did with your last company? Have that conversation. Be human and connect with your candidate as a human, because I can tell you people out there are freaking desperate and they desperately need people to be upfront and honest with them, and they need somebody to have a meaningful conversation, because what you're going to find as a company, you're going to find some great freaking talent out there that's willing to come to work for you for what you're paying, for the roles and responsibilities that you have open, that could bring tremendous other value and benefit that you can't see right now because you're just trying to fit a square hole with a square peg. And not all great candidates are that square peg. Does that make sense? I hope it does. If you're a candidate and you're interested in learning more about some of my services for career coaching, I'm happy to help you. Please drop me a line at steve@ripplecentral.com. You can check out my website at ripplecentral.com. And as always, thanks for checking out my videos. There's a bunch of other ones that you might check. I don't even know where we'll put the links, but they're somewhere on the YouTube channel. So please check them out. And as always, my friends, thank you for watching. Go out, do good, make something happen. And for those of you that are right now in that job search, have faith. It's going to come. It's going to come. I promise you. As always, my friends, ripple on.